This podcast is strictly to educate and share what we know of boarding schools because those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it.
In the last episode, we touched the surface of what the boarding school experience was like. We talked about the negatives and the positives of the boarding school. This is Daja Torres.
And Orlando Trevino from the American Indian Research Center for Health, and today we are going to explore Dr. Sosi's boarding school experience, expanding on the trauma of boarding schools.
Everything about this experience is traumatizing, especially towards young children. Not knowing where you are, how far your family is, the punishments people have gone through, and not being able to live life as you previously lived.
Kill the Indian, save the man was the motto once again for boarding schools. Marionette Prember wrote for The Atlantic, "These institutions created to destroy and vilify native culture, language, family, and spirituality."
My name is David J. Sosi, and I'm originally from a community called Jedito. That's not too far from Kemis Canyon, the Hopi Reservation. That's where I'm originally from, but I was relocated to Sanders. That's where we're currently living at, Sanders, my wife and I. And I'm a member of the Hinani Tudichini. That's like the Living Arrow people of the Bitterwater clan. And then my father's clan is Big Water, Totsoni. And then my maternal grandfather's clan is Kachini, the black streak running into the water, Kachini, not Otane, Kachini. And then my paternal grandfather is the Kia'ani, the Towering House clan. And like I said, we're living over in Nahat community.
It has changed the lives of those who were involved, the children and their families as well. Who could they trust? The Bureau of Indian Affairs, or the BIA, already had a rocky relationship with Native people.
When I was probably about maybe 7 or 8 years old, I was out herding sheep late fall. And back in those days, in the late 50s, the Bureau of Indian Affairs used to have individuals hired, Navajo individuals, to actually go out and look for children that are out there. So they would be driving around looking for children. And it just so happened they came over into the community that I was living in, Low Mountain, Arizona. So I was herding sheep out there, and apparently they saw me. So that evening they came back, and then they talked to my parents about me going to school, being taken to a boarding school. And even though my parents did not want to, they sent me off. They agreed to have me go. But there were certain promises that the people made, the individual that was going to take me off to work. He was a Navajo, so kind of some people that my family knew. And so I think it was that trust that they had with that individual.
When they took the children away, they would do it at night. This was to disorient the children so they couldn't figure out where they were going.
So, and I remember that being there thinking, which way was my home? Was it to the east or was it to the west, north or south? Where was it? And I wasn't too sure where they brought me from or which direction my home actually was, because I was brought there at night. So I pondered the idea of running away a few times when I was there. And on Saturdays, they used to let us go down to the trading post, which was just maybe half a mile from the boarding school. And I remember seeing horses tied up at these trading posts. And I kind of thought about maybe stealing one of those horses, borrowing one of those horses, and then riding it. And I was thinking that my home was east of Steamboat, when actually it was west, sort of northwest of Steamboat. So even if I stole that horse or borrowed that horse and rode it off to the east, I would have probably been lost.
However, this did not stop people from running away.
And then I was disciplined there when I was in Kings Canyon, attending grade school, disciplined a few times. And I ran away several times from the boarding school. So if you ran away, then you were even disciplined further. And some of those might include getting a spanking, being in an isolation room for maybe a day or two, and not being able to participate in any kind of an activity, such as going to the movies. Movies, they put on a movie every Wednesday and Saturday. And so if you misbehaved, then you couldn't be allowed to go to movies. That was some of the form of punishment.
Language and culture was lost through punishment from boarding schools.
But back in Kings Canyon, that's where I first, I guess, been exposed to being disciplined for speaking my language. If you spoke your language, Navajo, they would come and then take a soap. It was a yellow soap, a bar of soap, and they would put it in your mouth, and it didn't taste too good. It just really had an awful taste, and that was to discourage you from speaking your language. And then you were not permitted to participate in any type of a ceremony, traditional, anything having to do with traditional ceremonies.
Despite family being far away, they were still allowed to come visit their children and even take them home for the holidays. However, it was sometimes not possible to visit.
And then December, my folks, if they had the time and if they were able to, they came around. And back at that time, my parents did not have any vehicle. The only means of transportation was like a wagon. And it was close to maybe 20 miles from Kings Canyon to where we lived, 20 miles. And it would be like an all-day trip just to come to Kings Canyon and to pick me up. And they would spend the night. Catholic Church had a place where they had some of the people coming into the canyon to stay there. So we would stay there overnight, and the next morning we would go back in the wagon. And so this was, if the snow wasn't really thick, if it wasn't really thick, they were able to do that. But if it really snowed, maybe 2 to 3 feet, that's about maybe 2 feet or so, then it was impossible for them to come. So then I didn't go back for Christmas. So I stayed there the whole time till early May when school was let out. Then I would go home.
Even though he hated the boarding school experience, Dr. Sosi stayed in school in order to get an education. It was very important for his family that he did.
You know, when I was in high school, even when I was in elementary, I've always had an interest to learn. I was curious, and I wanted to learn about different things. And so, and my parents, as far as I remember, when I was growing up, many times I did not want to go back to school when I was like in the elementary. I did not want to go back to school. And then my parents, they always told me that, son, our life has been difficult, ranching, raising horses, cattle, sheep, and then also tending to the crop. And our way is become difficult, and we have to go through all that. We've gone through that, and as your parents, we have gotten used to that because that's just a way of life that we live. We become accustomed to that. But you're being brought up in a different environment. You come here during the summer, but in winter you go over to the white man's school. That's where you grow up. And so, and I know it's going to be difficult for you to live life as we have. So in order to make things better for you, we want you to go to school and get as far as you can in school, because that's the way it looks like it's going to be. Because in our lifetime, we went through this, I guess, the domination by the white people to where we're at today. And it's going to continue. So go to school and go as far as you can.
He would stay in school and endure the psychological trauma towards his learning interest in philosophy. This eventually stopped Dr. Sosi's interest.
We used to have an English teacher, kind of an old lady. So every week, we used to give a book report on some of the things that we read, the books that she signed, or books she told us to read. And as a young person, I developed an interest in how the mind works, and I started reading a lot about the different philosophers and psychologists, some of the things that they have come to understand. And I really got interested in that. So I would give my book report each week on what I've read as far as the mind, how the mind works, and some of the works of some of the great psychologists and philosophers. And so one time I went up before my class, all the students, and my girlfriend, my favorite girlfriend, was sitting right in front. A young girl that I had a crush on, but she didn't know it. I was standing up there all proud, and I started to read my book report. And then I was halfway through my book report, and that teacher slammed her hand, her fist on the table. Then she got upset with me. Is that all you can read? Is that all you know? Why can't you read something else? Can't you read something else other than the mind, the psychology? And so that destroyed me. That devastated me, because I was really interested in how the mind works, and so, and a lot of the things that I was reading about in psychology, kind of it was helping me to understand my life and all the different complications that I've encountered in my life, and even though some of them kind of scared me at times, and so I was really interested in that. But that day she destroyed me, and I think if I had continued, I would have probably been a great Indian psychologist, a great Navajo psychologist. and that, from there on, I just didn't have any interest in that anymore.
It is extremely difficult to live with this trauma. People normally bottle their feelings.
And a lot of those is sort of, I guess, something that's really hard to talk about, something that you don't really want people to know that this is what you've experienced, this is what you went through, and this is how it's impacted your life.
This trauma does not only affect the people who attended boarding schools, but their families as well.
Because I believe the trauma, having to experience something so devastating, becomes a part of your mental being, your psyche and all. And it's something that becomes a part of you. And then it's passed on to your children, because your children, when they're in their mother's womb, a lot of things get transferred through the umbilical cord into the mindset of the children, both what the parent, the mother and the father, what they experience, I believe gets transferred to the mind of the child. So certain things become innate, and in Navajo we call it Bit'ochi, meaning that it sort of like becomes, in a way, almost like hereditary. It's passed on from one generation to another. So trauma, I believe, is also passed on from one generation to another.
According to boardingschoolhealing.org, these traumatic experiences also affect some people's ability to parent. These students do not have a parental role model to look up to because they were taken from their parents. Aaron Blakemore goes deeper by pointing out that the schools were hotbeds of humiliation, abuse, and victimization. They were also dangerous. Unsanitary conditions and overcrowding fueled communicable diseases.
Children often in Native communities play a role being the little medicine person in their families' lives. This was Daja Torres
And Orlando Trevino
discussing the boarding school experience for American Indian Research Center for Health at the University